Hello, everyone. And today we're in the museum and we're talking to David. He's had a lot of
That's David.
questions. If you've seen our past videos, every now and then a little something is said about past collections and the big loss. And a lot of people have asked him to talk about that and to share it. And he's going to do that today. So I'm going to let him talk.
Ugh.
Because I don't know. I know some of it, but, I don't. I always stop him before he gets too deep into it. So we'll both be hearing it
Yeah.
for the first time.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear, and it broke me from collecting for a long time. It put me off of collecting for like almost a decade. Cause
So first, tell us, when did you start collecting?
late '80s, early '90s, started with comic books and expanded into action figure and toy collecting, and extensively because I was kind of a toy comic dealer at that time period, particularly in the early to mid 90s. And I used to do a lot of the Great Eastern conventions and plenty of that stuff. If there was a show going on anywhere around the Boston area, I was there and they knew who I was. It was a big deal. But I didn't really consider myself a dealer per se, because for me the collection always was first. What I was really doing was, I would buy up collections, cherry pick the crap out of it, and then if there was anything left over, that's what I would sell. It was always about the collection first. And I had amassed quite a bit of stuff. A lot of toys, a lot of action figures, a lot of comic books, really excellent condition stuff.
Now, was this stuff your for your own personal collection, or did you have a store, or what were you doing with the
I
collection?
didn't have a store. I had it was mine. It was my collection, and if I had duplicates, or if I had something that I wasn't interested in, or if I had the opportunity to upgrade, and if I had, let's say you have mint on the card something, and then you get another one, and oh, this one's mint on the card and it's unpunched. Well, keep this one and sell the other one, and that's how I would do it. So this is all majority my own personal stuff. I didn't have like a stock or running a store or anything like that, although it felt like that at times.
So you started collecting as a young adult, not as a child.
Yeah, pretty much young adult. And it was the G.I. Joe, and I've pointed that out before in like our last museum tour. This is the one. I managed to hold on to it. The Adventure Team Land Adventurer in the box, this one right here, is I had found that in a toy store, like a vintage toy store, and had that as a child, and it was destroyed. My mother actually destroyed it because she didn't like it. And I saw it and I was like, this is the one I had, and bought it, and I've managed to hold on to it all this time, even though I lost so much other stuff. And it was an incredible mass of stuff. If you've seen the size of this room, I probably could have filled this room 5 or 6 times at least with all the stuff that I had personally.
So that leads into what happened to
What
your
happened?
stuff.
Relationships happened. Is what happened. My ex, who I was not married to, and that's important to point out because the court doesn't care. I was with this person, and we had a couple of kids, and something had happened. Something went wrong with this person. I'm trying to, without getting into too much detail with it, she was starting to get kind of really messed up
Mentally
upstairs.
ill?
Yeah, something was really wrong, and I was trying to separate, and I was trying to get the kids, and went to work one day and got served. She got ahead of me with it. We went to court. She got custody. Unfortunately, it's a different topic of discussion, but when you go to family court, it's 80% maternal easily. So she just got custody. And this was in 2003. And
So you had your collection from the 80s all the way up to 2003?
yeah,
Okay.
I've been
And that whole time you were constantly collecting.
constantly collecting, pretty much, yeah.
Was
And
your the person you were with, they were also a collector?
yeah,
Okay. They
yeah, she
collected the
was.
same
She
things.
collected, no, primarily dolls. Like, she had a really huge collection of vintage Barbies and things like that.
Okay.
But it was primarily dolls. She wasn't really interested in action figures and toys, per se. But I was trying to get them away. I tried to make my case, and I continued to fight it even after I lost custody in 2003 with no luck whatsoever. Then in 2007, I was contacted by a social worker from the state. They had had their own separate investigation and had determined that she was abusing and neglecting the two boys. And called me and said, "Hey, listen, if we brought you these kids, would you take them?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." So they split decision, reversed it, and took custody and decision making away from her at that point and gave me the boys back. And then she subsequently ran away to Las Vegas, seriously, and she was never seen or heard from again.
And she ran away with your collection?
She ran away with my collection in 2003. I was just timelining
Oh, okay.
that it was, 2003, they gave her custody. 2007, I got them back. And she disappeared. They never saw or heard from her really again after she took off. But in 2003, when I was served, I was not able to return home. I could not go back to the house. And all my stuff was there. And I had pleaded this point in court during the case. She's got all my stuff. It's very valuable. It's a massive collection. Judge ordered her to return it, give him back whatever's his. It did not happen. She did not give me back my stuff. I managed to get very little of it back from her. Like I pointed out, I've got these back here are my own personal G.I. Joes that I got when I was a child. And it's probably about a third of what there was. I got these back. They're all loose. The rest of it is gone. The rest of it's in the wind. I got very little of my own personal property back. The rest of it I was not able to get back from her, even though the judge ordered her to return it. It was never enforced. She didn't do it, and they didn't back it up. And she was selling it. I was able to even demonstrate in court. Here's copies of pages that I've taken from eBay. She is selling this stuff. What are you going to do about it? Well, we order that you have to return it. All right, great. Who's gonna enforce that? Nobody. It was not enforced.
Now, just a question. Before you were served with papers, did you see any handwritings on the wall? Did something come in you and say, things aren't working out, and it could be that she destroys, burns, sells my things? Did any feelings or inclinations come to you?
Yeah, to a point. And that's why I had managed to salvage some pieces, because I got some of it out, put it in a storage. I couldn't get everything before that went down, and that's why I've even seen, like, on Facebook posts and stuff. I know there was one guy recently that was saying that he's going through a divorce and that he's got all his stuff in the basement. And I had left him a message on that post. I said, get it all out of the basement. No matter what it takes, get it out of there and go put it in a storage somewhere. Get every bit of it, his collection of toys and action figures, because something will happen. Something will happen. It happened to me. I was slowly getting it out. I just wasn't expecting to not be able to return home one day, basically. and it was quite a bit of stuff. A lot of action figures and toys. And remember, I was constantly upgrading. This stuff was perfect condition. Comic books.
Can you give us an idea of some of the action figures? I mean, just because you keep saying, I had a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
pinches, some ideas, so people can
Oh,
understand.
just for openers, action figures and toy lines. LJN, the Thundercats. You see, I got the one Chitara sitting up there, right? The only Thundercat I have. I had the entire LJN Thundercats line boxed and carded, every single piece. Yes, that means Thunderwing Lion-O for those of you keeping track, and Luna Lasher Mumra, which no one ever sees. I had all of them. G.I. Joe, the carded G.I. Joes like these. I had the entire 85 and 86 carded line. $6 Million Man, one boxed and one loose of everything Kenner made for $6 Million Man. Star Wars. I had everything from Star Wars, including carded examples. The original 12 mint on unpunched cards with clear blisters. I had the vinyl cape Jawa. I had boxed examples of everything, hundreds of loose Star Wars figures with the correct pieces. Remember, back then, you couldn't counterfeit the guns. The G.I. Joes like these. These are the ones that I had from that collection. These are the ones I was able to salvage. I probably, which I'm grateful that I still have my boxed examples because those could have been really lost. But I had dozens of boxed pieces, and I probably had 50 or 60 loose figures dressed like these from Fighting Man and from Adventure Team. You know, and it goes on and on. You'd be shocked. Schwarzenegger's commando figures, like I've got a couple down here, but I had a lot more of them. You can't find those anymore. Product people, which I've been able to rebuild the product people. You see on the wall over there, which is the ad icons up on the wall. Cops, adventure people from Fisher Price. Uh, it goes, yeah, it goes on and on. And again, pieces you can't replace. I'm not going to find the original 12 back Star Wars carded figures again. You know, back then they weren't worth nothing. Mego, the complete Planet of the Apes line, one carded, one boxed. The complete Star Trek line, carded and boxed. And I even had a sealed case of the Mego phasers. You know, you don't find sealed anything anymore. Comic books. Or no, you know what? Somebody was asking me the other day when I did looking at the tour video. They said, "Did you have Dungeons and Dragons?" And I had forgot that I did. I was like, you know what? I did have the LGN Dungeons and Dragons set on the card. I had that set. I forgot I even had it. That's how much stuff I had. Comic books, Daredevil 1 through 9, Iron Man 1 through 12, X-Men 1 through, I want to say, 250. Spider-Man 9 through 350. You can't find this stuff again. It's not happening. Batman number, I want to say 67 through 90. You're not going to find that, especially now that they encapsulate everything and charge incredible prices for it. You're not going to find that again. Avengers 1 through 5. Stuff that can't be replaced anymore. You know, the prices have gone up so much. I had the complete Mego Action Jackson line, boxed and carded. Or, well, they're all kind of technically boxed, but you get the idea. Mm-hmm. And back then, nobody wanted nothing for those. You couldn't get $10 for an Action Jackson in the box back in the early 90s. 90s stuff, the complete Crash Dummies, the complete Pee Wee Herman set carded and boxed. Well, I think just the playset was boxed, unless you count the dolls. But, you know, I could go on and on and on because I had just so much stuff. Nowhere to put it. A lot of it was in totes. And I was like, yeah, someday I'll have a setup where I can put everything up. And that'd be fun. And it's all vintage stuff. All now it is. The '90s stuff didn't count as vintage then, but now it does. And like I said, when I lost that in 2003, I just gave up collecting. I was like, screw it, I'm not going to be able to find this stuff again. What I had, I left it in the totes. I left it in a storage unit. I didn't look at it for years and years. And then I don't know. I just got sparked one day and started pulling the stuff out again and got interested again in putting the collection together, going back and looking and saying, "Oh, I wonder if I can get this stuff again," and looking at the prices and, oh my God, the nostalgia hunters out there have driven the markets up so much that it's difficult. It's difficult now to do it, but I still try to do it, as you can see, when you look around in the museum, and I'm with someone who enjoys the same hobby.
Do you have any advice for people in relationships with someone that don't collect, don't share the habit, or they just don't get along with? They feel like, okay, this relationship is going down the
Mm-hmm.
tubes, and they have a big collection, be it vintage or modern.
Yeah, you need to be careful. You really do. And if you're in a relationship that it doesn't feel right or you're not getting along, you're probably better off ripping the band-aid off.
You should just do it like a band-aid. One motion, right off!
Because one of the biggest mistakes that I made was spending too much time trying to fix the relationship. And if you're the only one trying to fix the relationship, it's not going to get fixed. You can't constantly be pouring water into a bucket full of holes and not getting anything back. So if you're the only one working on it, you're putting band-aids on bullet wounds. It's not going to work. You're probably better off walking away from it. Be smart about it. Just get it over with. That's what I should have done. Just earlier on, like I said, it had been slowly building. And part of the problem with that too is when things gradually are changing, you kind of overlook it in your mind. You don't necessarily realize how bad it could get because you get used to the bad you're already dealing with, but it's slowly escalating and you didn't realize. And if you feel like your stuff is threatened at all, you need to get it out of there. You need to get it out of there, put it in a storage so that you know where it is and you know it's safe. Because unfortunately, possession is 9/10 of the law. So that you've probably heard that expression before. It's very true. You can't prove it's yours. You very likely cannot prove that it's yours. And even if you can, nobody's going to help you. Like I said, the judge ordered, yeah, return all of his stuff. I'm making that an order. And what are you going to do? What I didn't lose to her, I lost having to sell some pieces to handle legal fees and other fees and expenses afterwards. And that's heartbreaking too, when you're forced into a position where you've got to sell part or even all of your collection. And you see too many stories like that. Some medical bill comes up, some other problem, and people have to sell out their collections, and they usually get taken advantage of. There are dealers out there. When you look on Craigslist, what do you see? You look on Craigslist, for sale, action figures, for sale, toys, looking for a deal, and half of it is ads from toy shops looking to buy your collection out. And they don't give you a good price. It's like going to a pawn shop. And I never understood how people sell out like that. I sold piece by piece when I had to. I never sold out a huge collection because I knew I would get ripped off. You're better off finding somebody who is a collector who's going to give you at least half the value, and keep it and take care of it, than some dealer that's like, yeah, I can only do this and this, and you end up getting 10% of the value for the whole collection. And it's heartbreaking. And we see stuff like that all the time. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot more pieces, a lot more like lines of things that I collected that I had that I could name, and I mean, what's the point? I mean, you kind of get the idea. The stuff
Yes.
that I've already mentioned is so rare and valuable, anyways. It just doesn't make sense. Major Matt Mason. I had the whole set of Major Matt Mason, and try finding that stuff on the card anymore. And look at the prices. It's impossible. But and I'd love to get Major Matt Mason back. And you brought that up in the collection. You were like, yeah, if you could go back and get any of your stuff again, what would you get? And it's like, oh, where do you start? You know, if you won the lottery, that would be great. Go back and get my Joes again. Go back and get my Star Wars again. But if I could even remember everything that I had, Mark's Best of the West, Mark's Knights. I had boxed and loose. I used to like to do that, have a boxed version and a loose version of things. And, you know, I try not to look back on it too much because it's another lifetime ago. It's in the past. And, you know, I'm collecting again. I'm with someone who is considerably more stable than what I've dealt with in the past. I'm with somebody who's a really good person, and it's a welcome change from what I was used to. Coming into my new relationship, it was so different. I almost couldn't recognize it because I was so used to conflict and worry and basically being unhappy and feeling like that's normal. And I don't have that anymore. And just to be with somebody who, even if they didn't collect, like you collect, LPH is a big collector too. Even if they didn't, if they just at least understand and appreciate that I do, even if they don't.
And to that, for many of you who don't know, I didn't start off as a collector. When me and David got together, he was already a collector, and I thought he had a lot of stuff. We were living in Illinois, and he had an office, and it had a lot of stuff in it. And you know, all I wanted him to do is keep it clean, keep it neat and in order and clean. And that's the only thing I always said, because when I saw it, it didn't look neat, it didn't look clean, and I bugged, nagged.
Yeah.
And then he cleaned it up, and I was fine. You know, I was able to look at it, and I'm like, oh, okay, that looks cool. That looks cool.
And she did collect, just not this kind of stuff.
I didn't. Yeah, I collected ceramic stuff. I didn't collect toys and action
snow
figures.
babies.
Snow babies and bells and bowls and picture sets.
And things like that. But then she kind of fell into the idea of the toy collecting and found it to be a lot more nostalgic.
Yeah,
basically.
once he got it straightened up, like I said, because he was in a small office, that's what we had.
It was a little cluttered.
Yeah, and it was cluttered, and you couldn't see everything. It was a lot of boxes. Some stuff was on a bookshelf. But once he straightened it up, cleaned it up, and you were able to actually see the stuff, it was like, oh, okay. Yeah, okay, I remember that. I used to watch this.
Yeah.
And, you know, then it started growing on me, and I didn't bother him as much. And then I started actually buying stuff for him, you know, to add to the collection. So, just, you know, for you that didn't know that.
Yeah. Another thing that I used to have a lot of too was autographs. 'Cause
Oh.
remember, I was at the shows. I had like boxes and boxes of autographed comics. I had autographed photographs because, you know, the cast members from like Lost in Space would be there, and you know, whoever. Oh, and they were hilarious too. The guy, I can't think of his name. The guy who did who was Dr. Smith and the robot always used to have a table together, and the guy had the robot, he still owned it, and they would get on the intercom and play act like they were on the old show. And it was hilarious, and they were really nice. Cast members from Gilligan's Island, Lou Ferrigno, who was like, he's at every show everywhere in the country. I swear there's 12 of them.
So talk to us about how you got into the going to the conventions and being a part of the convention?
Well, I basically just looking for stuff. You remember back in the day, eBay was a very new concept. You couldn't even host photos on eBay when it started. You had to have your own web page, put pictures on it, and leave links in the description that if people were able to open the links, follow to the website and see the pictures of what you were selling. So that's how complicated eBay was back in the day. The only way you could get stuff was either trade magazines or to go to shows. Vintage stuff, you couldn't find it. It's as simple as that. So that's how I ended up going to shows, comic shows and toy shows. And I got a lot of stuff there too that you can't find anymore. Animation cells and original art panels and things like that. I had tons of art pages from comic books and animation cells from shows and animated shows and movies. Dealers would come with cases of them. They couldn't give them away. You couldn't get $5 for a Masters of the Universe animation cell, you know. But the market has changed so much. You don't find that stuff at shows anymore. Artists would be there and they do sketches for you.
So you were at the shows buying, not selling.
Yeah, I would sell, but you know, I didn't have a table, but people knew me. So when I came in, they'd be like, "Hey, it's that guy," and what have you got? Because I would bring stuff with me to sell, and then buy whatever I was going to buy. But you know, I never actually set up a table. I didn't have to, really, which was fine because that costs. That costs. But I would come in and, like I said, the dealers knew who I was. The people would come up to me. What have you got? You know, what did you bring this time? As I would bring stuff in, because it was easier than going through the trade magazines. And up to a certain point, there was no eBay. And then when there was eBay, it was really complicated and it didn't do well back in those days.
So a question about conventions, because it sounds like you were into conventions several years now. Conventions nowadays, you go conventions, toy shows. That's mainly what I'm talking about. Toy shows or fairs or however you want to say it. You basically see the same thing over and over. And every now and then you might see a table and they might have one or two things that are vintage, but basically it's the same thing. You know, your Marvel Legends and every table has basically the same thing. Was it that way when you started in the 90s?
Absolutely not. You know, you went to a toy show and it was a trade show, and you rarely saw modern stuff because there was an abundance of it in toy stores, which still existed. You don't really have toy stores anymore. You wanted the modern stuff. Back then, the big thing in the early 90s, it was like the Toy Biz and Exo Squad, which again, by the way, everything Toy Biz made in the early to mid 90s, I had it. Exo Squad from Playmates, I had the whole line. But you wanted that, you went to KB, you could buy it 3 for $5 on clearance, and they'd have row after row after row of it. Those Kenner Star Wars, like Return of the Jedi, Power of the Force with the coin, I had a whole set because they were 3 for $5 at KB. You know, that's how it was. Not anymore. But nowadays, since they make very little of it, it's targeted at the adult collector's market, and you know, scalpers go and they buy it all up off the shelves, and the only way you can find that is to go to a show and pay 2, 3, 4 times the price. Instead of finding it hanging on the pegs like you used to when I was doing shows, you're going to a show and that's all you're seeing. You go to a show, half the show is Marvel Legends and Funko Pops and things like that, and you're like, you don't even want to buy it because you're like, damn it, I should have found that at Target. I should have been able to find that at Walmart. I should have been able to find that at Walgreens. Well, you didn't because they got there first. That was my big argument about the whole G.I. Joe classifieds.
Series.
Why I feel like just dropping off completely. You can't find that stuff at Target. When we went to the show, what do you see there? Target classifieds. Tons of them. How'd
Yeah.
they get there? Back then, you didn't see that. Modern stuff was in KB, it was in Toys R Us. That's where it was. You went in there, you didn't find toys that weren't at least 20 years old. Tons and tons of it. And the shows were cheaper. You know, the big cons now, people talk about, oh, I'm going to Comic Con, oh, I'm going to the Star Trek convention. Back then, those shows were cheap when they weren't in vogue.
When you say cheap, what is cheap?
Like when you go to the Star Trek show and it was they're taking up 2 floors in a hotel and they have like 500 dealers and they have people from Star Trek up on stage doing discussions and you paid $19 to get in.
Okay.
That kind of cheap. Or you went to the comic show and you paid a $3 admission price, and that included the autographs. Go to any table and get an autograph for free from the artists that were there. You know, Keith, McFarlane, people, real names. Do that now. You know, try doing that now.
Yeah, we were when we were in Illinois, I think they had WizardCon. I think WizardCon is the one in Chicago or something in Chicago. And just for one day, it was $150.
And it doesn't include nothing.
Yeah, and that was
Yeah.
for one day, wasn't? And
Yeah.
you know, it was like 3-4 days long, and every day they were having something, you know, some kind of event. But just to get in was like $150. Yeah.
And it's changed so much. And there weren't limits unless you were Todd McFarlane. Since I had mentioned the name earlier, because he set a limit. I remember, I think it was Great Eastern was the show he was at. And it was supposed to be no limit. Then it was 2. And then the day he got there, he was like, no, I'm only doing 1.
What?
Autograph per person.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with, that's where I get the story about Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard me tell that story before,
Mm-hmm.
where Jeff was going to punch him out.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped Jeff. I saved you from getting knocked unconscious, Todd McFarlane. You're welcome. Jeff was the kind of guy that would do it just so he could sit there and say, I punched Todd McFarlane in the face. He'll go to jail for that. He had been known to do things like that. But the only reason he didn't do it because he didn't want me to get in trouble with Great Eastern because they knew me. But yeah, it's changed drastically. It used to be all vintage stuff. It used to be inexpensive. I think it was a lot more interesting. A lot more interesting. And when I go to a show, that's what I want to see is old stuff. I don't want to see the stuff that went up on the pegs last week.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the nature of the business. Now that it's popular, if it's popular, people are gonna run the price up.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you wanna?
I don't think so. I
Talk
mean,
about?
that's the basic idea. I mean, I had a massive vintage collection, and I've brought that up before, even when I was at the convention, and the guy, I was talking to the guy, I think that's what sparked it initially, was the last tour video we did, convention tour, and I was talking to the one dealer, and he showed me the vinyl cape Jawa, and I was like, I had that. And he was like, you had this? I was like, yeah. And it's part of a collection I lost, and somebody asked, and they're like, what are you talking about? Are you serious? Because every once in a while I'll bring it up as like, you know, I used to have a lot more of those, or I used to have a whole carded line of this, things like that. And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, a lot of people have asked off and on, and so that's what this video is today, is me just kind of throwing it out there and giving you a general idea of what happened and how that was lost and how much there really was. And you know, I've barely gotten into the half of it, of the amount of stuff that I had. And again, because now it's cool, the prices have gone up so much, I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever find this stuff again, you know. But that's okay. If nothing else, it's given me the chance to start over. Once I got over it, and I was like, you know, I haven't collected for nearly 10 years because of this. And because you remember it's 2003.
Yeah.
And nearly 10 years I haven't collected, so it's like you're starting all over again. And I've enjoyed it.
That's
You
good.
know, I'm not complaining. I lost what I lost. Maybe I'll get it back, maybe I won't. It is, like I said, it's a lifetime ago. It's like a different, I was a different person. It was a different set of circumstances. And what are you going to do? You can't live in the past. All you can do is learn from it.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, if anybody has any more questions, I'm sure they can post it in the comment section down below, and I do try to answer as many of the questions as I can when people post them in the comments.
Okay.
And we'll see.
Well, that was David's story about his infamous collection that gets talked about every so often.
Yeah.
Now you have a more detailed description, a better understanding
Yeah.
of actually what happened and his great loss. So anyway, we're going to keep collecting. We're going to keep trying to replace as much as we can replace. And what we can't replace
Well,
is just going to be not replaced.
I guess.
And that's just how that cookie crumbles. So, as always, thank y'all for watching.
And we will see you again soon.